Very pleased to welcome Mara Koven-Gelman, who's the director of the Jewish Relations Council of the Buffalo Jewish Federation. Welcome, Mara.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. And Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum, who is at Temple Beth Tzedek and a relative newcomer to Western New York. Since, was it last July you arrived?
Right. Very glad to be here too.
And you've learned your way around and you've come to love the snow. Is that right?
I've had the good fortune of living in other communities where there is snow, perhaps not in this abundance, but it feels familiar and it feels nice.
Well, we're here to talk about Pesach, Passover, and the Interfaith Community Seder. That's been a history or a tradition here in Western New York. So let me begin with you, Rabbi Rosenbaum. What is Pesach or Passover?
Passover is one of the major Jewish holidays of the year. It is a week-long festival. Actually, when celebrated outside of the state of Israel, it's 8 days long. And it takes place usually at the beginning of spring. It takes place in either March or April. This year, just due to how the Hebrew calendar works, it's going to start in late March, which is a fairly early start comparatively. It's a holiday that commemorates the story from the book of Exodus from the Hebrew Bible, the story of the Israelites' redemption from slavery from Egypt. It says that in every generation, we have the responsibility of acting as if we were slaves who were redeemed by God. And by observing the holiday of Passover, that is our way of doing so. And a couple of highlights, which we can get into a little more, I guess, is the fact that, first of all, our diets completely change for this holiday. The idea was that the Israelite slaves, as they were leaving Egypt, did not have time to bake bread as they normally would. And so the bread that they came up with was unleavened. And so we are supposed to only have unleavened products throughout the time of Passover. So that radically changes a lot of the food we eat. And also the highlight, as you alluded to earlier, Stan, about a Seder. Outside of the state of Israel, the custom is to have Seders on the first 2 nights of the holiday. And these are festive meals and rituals that involve the telling of the story of the Exodus. And it's meant to include as many people as possible, Jew and non-Jew alike.
But Passover celebration is usually focused on the home. Is that correct?
Very much so. And partially because for so many people, we are turning over our kitchens to make sure that it's kosher for Passover. So it's a lot of preparation. It's a lot of cleaning. It's a lot of taking away the leavened foods that we have, which are probably more than one might guess. And also because of the traditions of having Seders in people's homes, the family Seder is often one of the great highlights for Jewish families. I would say that there are many Jewish families for whom Passover is on par with, if not more important than such a beloved holiday as Thanksgiving.
A real contrast, though, if we go back 2 years ago, the celebration of Passover versus this year in COVID-19.
Indeed. And obviously we are in a space right now, as we were in 2020, where we had to be very careful and concerned about being in other people's homes for the sake of everybody's health. So last year, when quarantines were relatively new for so many of us, we had to gather together in relatively small groups, many of us doing Seders on Zoom or other kinds of technology. And even though we are thankfully beginning to receive vaccinations as a community, we know that we're not out of the woods yet, and we need to be still cautious and still need to be able to utilize this technology to try to be more virtually close together.
Well, Mara, as Rabbi Rosenbaum mentioned earlier, here in the U.S., Passover is also the Passover Seder is an opportunity for persons of other traditions and religions and other parts of the community to learn about Judaism and the practice of Judaism.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly said. Also, just to share that Jewish Community Relations Council is really dedicated to building relationships with people from other faiths and backgrounds. And you're right, the Seder is an amazing opportunity to bring people together and to share those themes of how are we all enslaved? How do we become free? Renewal in spring. And I think it's just a wonderful way for people from different faiths to, get together and learn our traditions, but also draw upon their own.
Now, I remember way back when the first interfaith and the first series of interfaith Seders occurred, and they were held at least from the second year on at Temple Beth Zion. And there would be large 300 people, and people from many different traditions participating and sharing in the Haggadah.
Yeah, those were really beautiful. And I think at one point that was like the longest standing interfaith Seder, I think, in the whole country. And yes, it was a wonderful way, and each table was made of a diverse group. We weren't allowed to have people just, they couldn't know everybody. And we all, broke bread together. A lot of our leaders, our clergy would lead, and then we would ask other people to come up and participate in the Seder. So it really was integrated and wonderful. And I think we had a different idea, which, and some of us have participated, like Stan, was to really, as Rabbi Rosenbaum said, the Seder does really center around the home. So a couple of years ago, before COVID, we created something called Buffalo Open Seder. And we actually matched people who wanted to have a Seder experience with people in the Jewish community who wanted to have guests. And there are many, many ways to have a Seder, and across all the different branches of Judaism, and even within your own family's tradition. So we were able to place like 84 people, and it was a wonderful, I think, experience. And as we know, last year, we had to kind of change that.
And you did. There was a different kind of celebration last year.
Right. So we had something called the Passover of Hope. I think traditionally, sometimes there is like another Seder later. The rabbi could speak to it, like a month later for those that maybe missed the first one. Maybe it's more of a kind of a tradition, minhag. But so we decided to draw upon interfaith clergy that the Buffalo Jewish Federation took to Israel in 2017. And we were so honored that Stan was on that trip. And
what a wonderful event. It was just amazing.
So those bonds and those relationships formed the participants of this Zoom Passover of Hope, which was real. It was very meaningful. And it was widely seen within many communities.
Well, we have about 2.5 minutes left. And so we want to talk a little bit about the plans for this year.
So, I'm very excited to be a part of the Interfaith Seder that will take place on Zoom the Tuesday before the beginning of Passover this year. it is going to be an honor to be able to share the virtual space with other colleagues, other Jewish colleagues in the area, and also colleagues from many different faiths, many of whom I've yet to meet, but I look forward to hopefully this being the beginning of a really lovely working relationship with so many different religious leaders. It's going to be a fairly brief program, one that will center on what brings us together, matters of social justice, matters of how do we guarantee freedom for so many people around the world who are in desperate need of it across religious lines.
Well, we had developed and used a Haggadah here for the service, but everything focused around a meal, and that's not possible this year.
Yeah, we're not able to cater this one. Everybody, it's very much BYOM, bring your own matzah, if you will. But in all seriousness, we are going to have at least on screen some of the representative foods, but really the idea is to connect with one another through words, through song, and through just a general sense of fellowship.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time, so I need to say, how do people find out about this? How do they connect?
So we have a graphic, a flyer, which we can show you, and there is a place to register, which we can also, share that too. And there is no cost.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum and Mara Koven-Gelman for joining us and talking about Pesach, about Passover, and about the Interfaith Passover here in Western New York. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much.